All right, welcome to episode one of the Teen Stock Politics podcast. And today with us we have three people, and we're discussing one question that's quite important, I think. Why is declaring statehood so problematic? Yeah, and I think it's a super interesting question to talk about. So, recently I've been thinking, like, you see all these startups in Bangalore, no? Just why don't we just start a country at this point?
For sure, honestly.
Yeah,
Honestly, I think
Yeah, we should.
our desh, hamara desh.
Yeah, it's in the name.
You know Nityananda,
N-
right?
Bro.
He did that.
Shri Swami Nityananda.
Nah, hold
yeah.
up. Sri Swami Nityananda Paramashiva. Alright, get it right.
Definitely.
He started his own country,
Uh-huh.
Kailasa. It's, according to reports, it's off the coast of Ecuador, last I checked. He declared it to be
I mean,
his
if
own
he
country.
could do it, we could do it, right? What's the problem
Yeah,
with that? yeah.
Does he actually fulfill like the conditions or like the criteria to form a
I
state?
mean, legally.
Legally,
no.
let's check. Let's check. Population.
I mean, he
hoping
could
has
have a
it.
population.
He allegedly has an population of 20 million or something like that.
Okay.
But on the territory, I'm sure there is a population.
I mean, it's an island, so it definitely
has a boundary. Um,
a
international-
governance. I mean,
government. It's theocracy.
it's Nityananda, I mean.
Theocracy.
Wait, bro, what are you talking about? Like, where are all these things outlined? Like, did I miss out on some newsletter or something? Or
So there's a legal document
Uh-huh.
called the Montevideo Convention,
Uh-huh.
which is the basics for the formation of statehood, and we're essentially using the main four clauses to determine a state in our discussion. So you want to name them?
So it essentially lines out four criteria. The
Yeah.
first being, I'm unsure of the order, but there is you require a permanent population, a well-defined governing body. I'm unsure. of the
Territory,
reason,
yeah.
a well-defined boundary, and lastly, the ability to enter into relations with other states.
And
So-
Other
to be
countries, yeah.
fair, we were just discussing government. To be fair, it's a theocracy. We have other theocracies in the world. We've had other theocracies in the world. They've existed.
Name one.
The one
yeah.
Go for it.
theocracy, the whole of the Byzantine Empire was theocratic, if I'm not wrong.
Fair enough.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roman Empire, theocratic.
Okay.
So we've had theocracies in the past, and currently, I'm not sure if they're technically labeled as one, but Iran has a religious head. Hence,
That's fair. On Wikipedia, I've read it.
I mean, I don't believe that that's like fair enough to call him a
Call it a
theocracy
theocracy.
because
Yeah.
they have
Fair
a
enough.
religious leader.
fair enough.
But-
But where Nityananda fails on meeting the conditions is the ability to hold international relations.
Okay.
but also
Although he's
population.
gotten close,
For context for the audience, this is complete satire. We do not believe that Nityananda can actually establish a state. but one can wonder
Yeah.
though.
one can,
Yeah.
One can wonder.
But like, what if one day I just woke up and I said, I don't really like my country. I want to make my own country.
Do not
Like-
say that ever.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you have a
That's probably-
plethora of options to choose
Uh-huh.
from: Kashmir, Khalistan. there's the Tamil Tigers who want a
Uh-huh.
separate Tamil Nadu apparently.
Is that like an
I mean-
IPL team?
Sorry.
Tamil Tigers.
Yeah, like choose choose your weapon.
Oh shit.
the Chennai
That's my
Super
bad.
Kings, bro. That
They're,
is,
Tala
they're
for a
actually
reason.
responsible for a fair amount of terror attacks.
Oh, that my bad, guys.
But, yeah.
Educate yourselves.
Wait, so I'm pretty sure all of us have one specific instance in mind when we talk about statehood. And I think it kind of lines up with what you're wearing. Care to explain what's that on your neck?
So this is a Palestinian kafaya. It's a representation of the culture of Palestine. There's a lot more about it, about its patterns, etc., etc. But it represents the Palestinian struggle and the Palestinian cause.
Okay.
Fair.
So what about you guys? Do you think that, like, is there a good guy, bad guy kind of situation? How can we walk out of it? You know, one state, two states, three states, no state.
No, yeah, that makes sense. But you have to see, it's not a black and white situation. That's why
Exactly.
it's lasting for so long. You don't have a single party who's right or who's wrong, and that's why we don't have a solution so far. Right, and there's a lot more history when it comes to it.
Like?
So, for example, Palestine, right? That comes from a Romanian word, actually. Palestina. Palestina is what they named the territory in the year 1302, the Roman Empire, called the area of Judea. It was formerly known as Judea. They call it Palestina. and there's a lot more history to it, because even when it comes to the territory of Israel, you didn't have Jews there all the time, right? And in the territory of Palestine, you didn't have Arabs there all the time, or Muslims, right? So it's a lot more complex because both parties migrated.
Okay.
And again, there's a lot of debate when it comes to the first clause, when we were talking about Nityananda, the permanent population. So there's never really been a permanent population in Israel
Uh-huh.
or Palestine.
Oh,
But
okay.
the essential problem that that poses is if you look at history from that perspective,
Yeah.
it can be argued that all humans technically belong in Africa because that's where we migrated out of.
That's fair. Yeah.
So with that you get into the legal aspect of whether you own a land or
exactly.
not.
Yeah.
So with that you come to modern structures. At what point did the modern legal structures start? So at
Correct.
what point did a person in that particular land start owning that land?
Exactly. So, like countries, right? Just
Yeah,
one second.
yeah.
So, countries, in a sense, most countries have come from breaking off from the British Empire.
Yeah, that's
right.
true.
There was a huge
Even
transition.
Israel, Palestine, right? Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
If I'm not
then-
wrong,
Yeah.
there's an Independence Day on average every 6 days
Yeah.
from the British Empire. Every 6 days in the year, we have an Independence Day.
Literally.
But
Yeah.
I just want to come at it from a legal aspect. When you look at the frameworks that exist currently, there is one singular problem that we face. There is no overarching body. In
Yeah.
a country, you have a government that enforces. Internationally, you are being enforced by your peers, in essence. That's
Yeah.
the most basic way to explain customary international law.
Yeah.
Right. And because of that, there is no way to make a framework that will actually help us define how to decide upon statehood.
No, but what about referendums, right? So, like, referendums are basically when you go to a population, you ask them, listen, do you like mama more? Or do you like papa more? Like, who do you want to stay with, right? So,
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I
Again,
mean, theoretically speaking, that's never really worked out. Like, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
the Crimean region,
Yeah.
or
If
historically,
I'm not wrong, Czechoslovakia half of them chose to be with Hitler.
Uh-huh.
precisely.
And then Hitler just used that to march into the rest of it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So you can't assign everything to a referendum.
Okay.
A country would halt in functioning.
I
But
mean,
isn't
but
there a
see,
commission on referendums, like the Venice Commission or something similar?
exactly. But see, the problem with implementing a referendum is that the UN's jurisdiction must stretch that far, right? To which the party that is holding the referendum must consent to. And when all of these legal structures, etc., get involved, apart from that, practically thinking a referendum being held impartially in an efficient manner is almost near to impossible. And we've seen this happen in several parts of Ukraine, in Crimea, in the Western Sahara, I'm assuming, I believe, etc., etc. So practically enforcing it is extremely difficult.
Got it.
Yeah, it is. On a better note, like where referendums have worked, is in Catalonia in Spain. All right. They voted to go away from the Spanish government, but the best that they could get is that they could only have certain rights to themselves. Right. They became what do you call a state like that?
Autonomous?
Autonomous. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the term. So they became an autonomous state. So even if a referendum works, the underlying thought process that even we have, right? If in India we were to have a referendum, right, and let's say Kashmir wanted to leave India and form their own state, their own country, the rest of India would not want that to happen, right? Because there's that nationalistic aspect to it. So even when referendums work, and even if we want people to have like the right to self-determination, that's easier said than done. What all of us are thinking is that no, our state shouldn't leave. We should instead make it work.
Yeah.
So that's what happened in Spain. That's what's happening in Kashmir or like Khalistan.
No,
for
but
example.
aren't there differing levels of that? Like something about de jure and de facto statehood, where like if I say, okay, I declare myself a state and I satisfy all the prerequisites of the Montevideo Convention, but I'm still not recognized by the UN, then I'm called a de facto state, right?
Yes.
Where, for example, look at the Taiwan or Republic of China, whatever you want to call it. Even now, a lot of people in a lot of countries in diplomatic relations with China follow their own version of the one China policy, right? So, do you think that having these differing levels of statehood even could be a part of the problem of why it's so difficult to declare statehood?
Yeah, that is a huge problem also, because again then it becomes political, right? Like he was saying, there's no overarching body, so we are picking and choosing when we want to follow the laws, right? So like for Taiwan, for example, right, some countries choose to follow the one China policies, others don't. And then even for the Palestinian cause, right, countries are now deciding to support the Palestinian state, not before. So, is there a line that has to be crossed for a country to, or does it suit the country to choose them as a state or not? Right. So, we're putting it in the hands of others to recognize ourselves as a state or not because, like he said, there's no overarching
Okay,
body.
got it.
Yeah.
It's like you've been referred to a lot, but you've been staying kind of silent.
No, mainly because
He makes his
I don't want to
point and
get
dips.
beaten.
Ah.
No, I'm joking. It's just in the current geopolitical state of things, you have too many, for the lack of a better word, bullies.
Huh.
All right. You have a lot of big countries, well established countries with a lot of power. And to paraphrase Spider Man, with a lot of power comes a lot of responsibility.
Great point.
Right? But because you have this niche group of countries that have 90% of the power in the world, you have a lot of countries who are not able to, countries or states that are unable to do anything about it.
This is
right.
actually a book written by this person called Samuel P. Huntington. It's called Clash of Civilizations.
We're not
And-
sponsored, guys.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
not sponsored.
This stream is sponsored by Raid.
But he gives a very similar perspective, like to understand how like these politics work, where there's like teams
Yeah,
of nations formed and there's all these factions, and he says that all of this at the end of the day is based on a civilizational clash at a cultural level, a difference of cultures, right? Like, for example, the Indians and the Western countries get along better, right? So he lists out a set of civilizations that still exist in the modern world because that's always been the basis for wars to be waged on during all of human history, right? So civilizations have always fought against each other, and even today, we see it. We see the Russians allied up with China. We see Indians going along with the Western nations, and that's so on and so on. And I feel like that simplifies. Of course, there are a few nitty gritties here and there that we need to not consider, disregard.
I
but-
think what you're saying aligns really well with game theory. So, game theory is a mathematical way of essentially judging social situations. All right. So,
Yeah, I'm sorry. It made me think of that YouTuber game theory.
Game theory.
Yeah.
Again,
Matt,
not
right?
sponsored.
Matt, yes.
Yeah.
He's
that was
retiring.
serious, bro.
not sponsored.
My apologies. Please continue.
Yeah. So, game theory is a mathematical way to put down interaction in essence. All right. So you have players. In our situation, the players are, of course, the countries at hand,
yeah.
and you have the game, right? So the game in this situation, it can. So there are many types of games. There's the prisoner's dilemma, for example. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. For those of you who aren't familiar with the prisoner's dilemma, you have two.
Okay, never mind.
never
Somebody
mind.
doesn't want to talk to you. You want to talk about something.
Yeah,
But
fly on the
let's
wall.
assume Uncle Sam is not watching, and you can continue
Continue.
speaking without fear.
Yeah. So you have two prisoners who are in different rooms, and they have the option. They have two options: rat the other one out or stay quiet. Now, if both of them rat the other out, there is one set of outcomes. If one of them chooses to rat and the other doesn't, there's another set of outcomes. The best possible scenario on average is when neither rats the other out, where both of them get a median level of punishment. But they've also got to remember that if the other person has ratted them out when they've stayed silent, person A rats out B, B does not say anything, B gets a way harsher punishment, and A walks free.
Yeah. Okay, that makes
Right?
sense.
Yeah.
So you have kind of a no win situation, because whatever happens, you're gonna end up with an outcome that nobody wants.
True.
Right? And this tends to happen a lot with countries.
No, in line with game theory, right? If you actually look at the situations where states want statehood, right? There's always a bigger party or a bigger state who does not want that to happen or wants them part of their territory. For example, and doesn't necessarily have to be bad, right? China, Taiwan. China does not want Taiwan to leave as a state. They consider it its own. Israel and Palestine. Israel does not recognize it, so Israel wants it as its own. Spain and Catalonia, India and Kashmir, Pakistan and Kashmir, right? Khalistan and India. And this affects a lot of geopolitics. So when it comes to supporting statehood or recognizing statehood, more often than not, because we don't have an overarching body, it's up to interpretation and politics, right? So when it comes to Khalistan, Canada and India have their own foreign relations when it comes to it. When it comes to Palestine, no one's looking at it through an objective lens that, okay, they achieve these four categories, right? They're looking at it from a political situation. Oh, if we do support, what's our situation with Israel? Same goes for Taiwan. What's our situation with China? So when it comes to statehood, it's more than a legal aspect. It's game theory.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There are too
it
many
comes down to
factors for
morals,
us
yeah.
to judge.
Yeah.
So basically, what do you think is the root cause of all of this? Is it just greed? Is it like I want more territory?
It's not.
So-
Not
it's not
always.
greed. That's a huge oversimplification that I
Yeah.
see a lot of people do. There are too many factors for us to pinpoint one as okay. It is this that is causing countries
Correct.
to behave this way, right? Countries have their own interests, and it is not simply like oh, I want more oil, I want more land or something. They
Yeah.
have populations to think of. So we create this idea that governments are evil. Governments tend to work in very shady ways.
I mean,
sometimes, yeah.
realistically
Yeah.
speaking, obviously, like Adesh said, you have to look at it objectively.
Yeah.
But when you really think about it, there is no objective way to look at it because when you take away the legal aspects away, morality comes in,
Yes,
right?
morality,
So
that's a
the Israelis, for example, is not Israelis have their own justifications for having Israel on a moral basis, and so do the Palestinians, right?
course.
But the problem is of what moral argument you take here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And when you take in the Bible into consideration or the Hebrew Bible, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely sorry. I've been ranting. I completely forgot the statement you made.
that you can't pinpoint one
You
factor
can't
when
pinpoint
it comes
one
to
factor
saying,
as the reason why countries act the way they do.
yeah, like it can't be just greed, just hunger for power.
Yeah,
because they have
precisely.
populations to take care of.
Exactly.
But most of the time, isn't the like doesn't the Declaration of Statehood come from down under? For example, you have in China, you have the People's Republic of China and you have the Republic of China, and they were basically political parties, and it's due to them that is split apart, right?
Yeah.
And even now in the Israel-Palestine conflict, like a major reason for Hamas becoming the governing body was because like the people themselves apparently voted them in. I won't verify or
Yeah,
deny
yeah, yeah.
the
No, fair.
veracity of that claim.
Correct.
But most of the time, isn't it like a David versus Goliath situation? Or is
It
that
usually is. And
Uh-huh.
also, you have to remember when it comes to declaring statehood, there's a very, very, very fine line between sedition and right to self determination.
yeah.
So,
So what is sedition
True
again?
sedition essentially is when you go against the national interests of a country or the national integrity of a country and try to break away. And essentially, that comes across as sedition. And most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, the right to self determination comes across as
As
sedition.
sedition.
Okay.
I mean, it's interpreted different in India as we know it.
Yes,
UAPA
yeah, I'm
and
not
all.
going to break away.
We're not
Just
gonna address.
enough, yeah.
Big Brother is watching us, guys. We should watch out.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what do you think is the best way to resolve it? We talked about the lack of a governing body. We talked about how once you take away all the legalities, it's a moral standpoint, right?
Yeah.
So at the end of the at the end of the day, do you think there is a right solution to the problem? Can we just say, okay, listen, I'll give all of you your own states. You can do this, you can do that, or do we not do that?
Now, if I just reference back to game theory, I brought up the concept of a no-win game, right? That's exactly how it is. We're never going to have a solution for any conflict like this or any problem like this, which leaves everybody happy with it.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to, as Zed said, it becomes a moral thing, right?
Yeah.
Because legality in the international standpoint is, for a great part of it, irrelevant. Right? It does not make a lot of difference what the legality is because you have countries who are willing to push the legalities around.
Yeah.
Especially if they have power, yeah.
But see, at the end of the day, legalities exist to push for justice, right?
of course.
Yeah.
And justice in itself is a sort of like a moral ground. And I mean, see, to me, when it comes to, for example, Israel and Palestine, injustice and justice is pretty marked down. But then again, I understand that there are differing perspectives, etc. But the point is that although you might be wishing to establish justice, for example, in the case of Israel and Palestine, there are people who want to free Palestine from the river to the sea. There are people who want to free only an Israel. There are people who want two-state solutions, right? But regardless of what is the most justified, the scenario we see here you have to go for something that is practically possible.
Of course.
Now, as much as I want to advocate for a one-state solution,
Yeah.
for example, that does not mean that that is the most feasible way to proceed in at least the current scenario, in the modern day and age,
Exactly.
as of today.
Okay, so I think in conclusion, like, can we all come together and say that basically there's no answer to the solution? Statehood.
Quite
It's
literally.
it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
it's not simple enough for us as
Because this
teens
is teen
talking about
talks, politics.
Politics.
teens
Yeah.
talking about
To
to
come up with a-
quantify and come up with. It is a
Okay.
very complicated issue. In all scenarios, it is a complicated
Mhm.
issue. It is not. I am not going to claim that I have enough knowledge about Israel and Palestine to come up with a solution that will work out for everyone. But in the end, what I do believe is, as I said, it is a no-win game in every.
But don't you
Not
think that's the
exactly.
problem where
That is the problem.
where
That is the
8
problem.
billion people around the world say that, oh, it's too
It's too
complicated and there
complicated, let's
can't be
just
any
leave it.
solution.
Yeah.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
but I
See,
think
only
all of us
solution-
should be
Huh.
like, I understand where we're coming from. Right now, we're just teens talking politics.
Yeah.
But then, maybe 10, 20 years down the line, we start our own Kailasa. Except not
Okay,
as kind of
alright.
out from the left.
Well, I'm just
Yeah.
establishing this. We're calling it Adesh or nothing. So
Okay, yeah,
Guys,
our
guys,
desh, you
just
know?
for the context
So-
of Big Brother watching this, it's against the constitution to make a country.
Yes.
So
do not
This is
make your
satire.
own country.
Do not-
This is
All these
satire.
guys, okay? Don't.
if you're watching this at
yeah.
home, do not try to
It
make
is
a country.
very,
Yeah.
very illegal.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
not.
See, the only logical solution that I see, right, is because when it comes to statehood, like we explained, it comes to a moral issue at the end of the day, right? That subjective point of view, that objective point of view. And most countries, most governments tend to neglect that. Morality goes on a lower scale because they have to national interests, economic interests, etc., right? Which comes into their foreign policy. Morality is somewhere down there.
Yeah,
And in some countries, it's even more down there because of the government that has been chosen.
Got
So
it.
the only thing right now that we can do is hope that you elect people who have that morality, that sense of morality, and can bring it to the government.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we can wrap it up over there. I think that was super insightful. I learned a lot personally.
Thank you.
We know what lines not to step over. We
Yeah.
learned what lines other people have stepped over.
Like
So
Israel and
yeah, yeah.
I was actually going to go for Sri Swami Nityananda
Yeah.
Paramashiva.
Okay. And then with that, I think we can say this is the first episode of Teen Talk Politics coming to a close. Thank you guys for hopping on. I learned a lot. I hope you guys did as well.
Yeah.
And with that, we'll see you next time.
Yeah. When we start Adesh.
Yeah.